Okay, so we've noticed that a month and a half ago, almost 2 months, Elizabeth Warren was surging. She was coming out with plan after plan. Oh, I have a plan for education. I have a plan for Medicare for all. I have a plan for a green military, etc. And she was surging. People were like, oh, she's not that bad. She's pretty much like Bernie Sanders. And even some of the Bernie people were like prepping her up. Oh, she's not that bad. Her and Bernie would be great together. The problem is that was largely ignoring a lot of the inner issues that Warren has had for the longest time and that a lot of people just haven't talked about. And we've gone over these throughout the show. But of course, as time progressed and as she went on the debates and as she kind of dipped her toe in the progressives and then went back to the establishment, never really standing for anything. Because if you don't pick something, you're not standing for anything. You can't just, be back and forth like that. Um, and now her poll numbers have started dropping. They've started completely dropping. She's sinking. And as she started dropping, Bernie Sanders has started rising. So let's look at a morning consult poll. Some of Warren's numbers have dropped by a significant amount of points. About 15% of likely Democratic primary voters prefer her as their first choice, which is down from 6 points since October 20th. And this drop in support is mainly driven by the highest educated, the oldest, and most liberal voters. This erases her slightly. She held over Senator Sanders, a candidate whose policies appeal to the type of Democratic voter her own policy plans appear to target. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that, Bernie and Warren appeal to the same people. A lot of Warren supporters are mainly ex-Hillary supporters, are even more to the right of her than, they're more to the right than she is. And so a lot of her supporters are actually not very much from the same base of Bernie supporters. So I disagree with that. But on the surface, the mainstream media and others like to say that a lot of her supporters and her base is very similar to Bernie Sanders. So here is a chart that just shows exactly who are the demographics and the groups who I've identified Elizabeth Warren as her first choice, and how that went from October to November, specifically in older populations, the extremely politically interested, most primary voters with postgraduate degrees and higher incomes. So you can see that all of her the majority of her base that was hardcore for her have actually dwindled. The point at which her support among key groups began to fall correlates with her candidacy talk about healthcare. So, as I said, Medicare for all was something Warren said that she supported. She kept invoking Bernie Sanders, Senator Sanders and I, and Medicare for all. But Medicare for all is the top issue for Democratic voters. I mean, it is across the board. Over half, about 60% of people support Medicare for all, and nationally, across the board. Even Republicans support Medicare for all. This isn't a bipartisan issue. This is a very important issue to many Americans. She didn't really pick. She said she was for Medicare for all, and then she said it would lower people's taxes, but then the math didn't add up. It really didn't lower people's taxes. It actually made people spend more money. And so when Pete Buttigieg called her out on it, he's pushing Medicare as a public option, which is interesting because when Elizabeth Warren recently came out for her latest plan that we've talked about before, it is entirely a public option. It is called Medicare for All option, and you can opt in or opt out. And that is what a public option is. So it's really interesting that how she shifted. And of course, in correlation to when she shifted on healthcare and started not really having the knowledge, she seemed like she hadn't even read it. She definitely seemed like she was not at all involved in the writing, but people from the Obama administration and who were responsible for the ACA were involved. So that lost her some credibility there, especially the going back and forth. I support Medicare for all, but now it's an option. Oh, now it's a 10-year situation. And no, now it's not. And it's a 3-year situation. It's like, which is it? Which way, Warren? Like, which is it? What are you advocating here? And so we can see that even in New Hampshire, according to this poll on 2020 Democratic nominations by the Boston Globe, Bernie Sanders is number one, as the likely nominee, first choice, and then comes Elizabeth Warren to number two, and then Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, Tulsi Gabbard, and Andrew Yang. Tulsi Gabbard, who has increased, by the way, to a whopping 6% in a very short amount of time. So the bad news for Warren equals good news for Bernie, because as Warren has dwindled, Bernie has just kept rising in the poll numbers. According to David Serrata and Burn Notice, Bernie has gained 9 points in early state polling, and he got all this from, of course, the morning consult polls that we've been talking about. You can see the Bernie surge since October, and you can see the 9 points he's gained according to this poll. Now, I take polls with a grain of salt. I don't really necessarily think that we need to really pay heavy attention to them, but I do think that they're important in the sense of framing people's minds. When people see Bernie Sanders rising the polls, that does something to their psyche. So as much as I don't really rely on them, I think it's important for people's motivation, for momentum's sake. And you can see here, Bernie in the red has been rising. Biden's been declining. Warren's declining. Buttigieg declining. Steyer's declining. And Harris, of course, in a rapid decline. And then we can look here at the tracking the name recognition and favorability. Bernie Sanders has the highest of these people here in name recognition and favorability. The lowest would be Pete Buttigieg, which is kind of interesting how he's polling so high. With Sanders, it's important to note that Tulsi Gabbard is also surging rapidly, as I said, and Yang isn't too far behind either, and these two are anti-establishment candidates. But MSNBC, of course, has excluded them. You see Bernie there at 64%, and this is for firm support for the 2020 Democratic candidates. You see Bernie Sanders has the highest firm support, then they jump to Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, and Pete Buttigieg. But the truth is that actually Tulsi Gabbard is the second most, and then Andrew Yang is the third. But they completely ignore them. So Tulsi got second place with 58%, and Yang got third place with 42% for firm support category. It's incredible because they don't just do this to Bernie. They do this to anybody that they deem a threat, anti-establishment, who goes after the Democratic Party, not just the Republicans and Trump. And people really love that. I don't know if we've noticed, but people love it when Bernie goes after the Democrats. People love it when Tulsi goes after Hillary or Pete Buttigieg or Kamala Harris. And so when we have people like that, and Andrew Yang going after the mainstream media, and and maybe Tulsi boycotting the debates, it's those things that really get you to be excited and like, hey, these people are actually challenging the status quo. So it's important to note that it's something that we want to see more of, and we don't want politicians, like our progressive ones, to shy away from that. Bernie Sanders is also polling the highest when it comes to who people trust the most. He has about a 29% compared to all the others, and he's one of those people that people are trusting the most. And in case you guys missed it, here are 5 key sets of the polling data that shows the Bernie surge, that just displays it full blown. And it's mostly being fueled by a working class coalition. So the first thing is poll. Bernie is tied for first. Since July, Bernie has gained 7 points in Emerson's national poll and is now tied for first in the most recent survey. Bernie's back in second. So this is since October. Bernie's gained 5 points in the RCP, Real Clear Politics, polling average, and the single largest gain of any candidate in the race, which is awesome. And of course, now he's firmly in second place in that one. 3, voters mostly trust Bernie, like I mentioned before. So Reuters, Kaiser, and CNN have shown that Bernie is a candidate most people trust. And 4, Americans don't want health care half measures. Of course, again, Elizabeth Warren started dipping down when she couldn't explain her health care plan really well, when she started going back and forth between a public option and between actual Medicare for all. And because the majority of Americans who are uninsured is the number is rising, Bernie's plan, of course, of Medicare for All covers everybody. And number 5, Bernie is commanding lead among young people. And this one is super important. In fact, if it's not the most important thing in the world, it truly should be, because the youngest people are getting registered in droves. A recent article came out talking about how the majority of the people being registered now are young. And when young people vote, you're going to see a more leftist candidate, a more progressive candidate. In particular, Bernie not only leads with college students, but he's the only candidate with substantially more support from college students. That's the reality. And you're not going to see that data on CNN, MSNBC, anywhere, because they don't want you to see it. They want you to think that Bernie is like not in the lead. It's funny because my mom even tells me they don't show him on CNN. They don't show him anywhere. I wait and they don't show him. I'm like, this is what they do. This is exactly why we do what we do, because they're not showing the truth. It's not even about liking Bernie. You can hate Bernie all you want, but you got to show the truth. You got to show the polling. You got to show the data, the raw numbers. So that's a fact that can't be denied, right? But of course, the New York Times and other mainstream media outlets are pretending that this isn't real, that this is all a lie, that this is a fantasy we're creating in our heads. As the polls and are coming out that Bernie Sanders is leading in New Hampshire, the New York Times said, quote, "Did New Hampshire fall out of love with Bernie Sanders?" And and then, David Serrato tweeted about this, but you can see the Emerson polling here where it says New Hampshire 2020 Sanders jumps to lead. And what I want to close with is the fact that Bernie Sanders is obviously in the lead. They can make fake articles all they want. They can talk about his age, talk about, how he may not have enough money, how he is, just too leftist to win. But they can't deny the fact that the majority of people, working class people, agree with his policies, that the majority of people he fundraises from are very working poor, and they're still giving $2 or $3 or something like that. And that he doesn't have a problem raising money when he needs to. That the more you attack him, ignore him, he's going to gain that support. That no matter how many billionaires and people like Bloomberg you throw in, who are just there to stop Bernie Sanders, it doesn't matter. Like what's the point? Like you can try all you want, but if you really want to beat Donald Trump, it's time to get behind the front runner, and that front runner is Bernie Sanders. And I'm talking to the mainstream media, the pundits, the Democrats, all who pretend that Bernie Sanders just doesn't exist, that he's not filling stadiums, that he doesn't have 1 million volunteers, that he isn't like a social media star, that there's not a bunch of whether they're celebrities, political people in general endorsing him, that he doesn't have a movement about all of us, about everybody, that it's just, you can't beat that. You can't motivate people to vote for Bloomberg because he wants to defeat Donald Trump. We don't need yet another politician who wants to defeat Donald Trump. We need another politician who wants to change the recipes that led to Donald Trump. That's what we want. A politician that can change all of the things, all of the systemic issues that led to the election of Donald Trump, because we want to prevent a Donald Trump from becoming president, but we also want to prevent someone like Hillary Clinton and the establishment in the Democratic Party from becoming president, which would lead to the other end of the spectrum. And so they're all one big party, one big aisle, and they're clearly there to suppress Bernie Sanders, to run against him, to ignore his poll numbers, to ignore his rise, and to prop up anybody and everyone else who is not him. And that is part of the establishment. They're not going to do that with Yang. They're not going to do that with Williamson or Tulsi Gabbard. So bottom line, don't believe the mainstream media. Keep spreading videos like this. Keep watching. Keep on your toes. And seek the truth. It's our job to do this because they get paid to tell you lies. So thanks for watching, guys, and please like, share, and subscribe. And we're also on Twitter, Twitch, Rockfin, which is a cryptocurrency platform. And make sure you click the bell on the combo couch. And even if you've subscribed before, make sure you're subscribed, because they're unsubscribing people. They're like, focused on like unsubscribing many of our people, and we're also on MCSC network. We are not on the mainstream media. We're on the MCSC network, and yeah. So thanks for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Combo out.